everybody, and welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. And my co-host for today is, I'm going to call him a legend of aughts horror because he directed one of the great horror movies of the 2000s in The Ruins. Watch it again if you haven't watched it recently, and find it for the first time if you haven't. Also, lately, you can watch his film Swallowed, and now, coming up now, you can watch his film The Passenger, starring all-time hunk, all-time great actor Kyle Gallner. Carter Smith, what do the people need to know about you before we get going, besides that introduction?
Oh, that's a good introduction. I mean, do they need to know? They probably don't need to know anything.
They should know that you directed Into the Dark's Midnight Kiss episode as well.
Midnight Kiss,
yes.
Yeah. I had a not-so-secret prior career as a fashion photographer.
Yes.
Before I ever made a film, which is like, horror people often don't know that. And, you know, the fashion people have no idea that I'm off making horror movies. So it's like this weird double life that I have lived.
I was going to say, how is it having a double life then? What are the pros and cons of having a double life? A Peter Parker and a Spider-Man?
There's no crossover. It was so strange. Like, I would come back from like The Ruins, you know, or like a shoot and be like, go back to shooting stills. And like, nobody... Even
no one had questions.
Like, of course, I mean, my friends, you know, the people that I work with all the time, you know, of course they were interested, but like, you know, in general,
yeah,
it was kind of amazing to me that it was like so completely separate.
I mean, it is such an intersection of my interests and my joy that like the director who made The Ruins has also shot Karli Kloss. Like, that is such a weaving together of... I have a custom tank top that I made that just says Karli Kloss in gold letters because she's our greatest American fashion export of the 21st century, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so I am very excited about the dual identities that you have.
Yeah, and Karli Kloss is great, by the way.
She seems like she's great, and I'm so happy to hear that.
I just posted a picture of her. I did this shoot with her where she played a superhero, and I had her like full Eyes of Laura Mars style, like burning cars, like robots, like, you know, lifting up, you know, it was amazing. It was so much fun. Oh my God,
are you the man to finally then bring back fashion into horror in a way that like Eyes of Laura Mars... I'm forgetting the name.
There's so few that are chic as that. That's the thing. There's no. So chic. I mean, you know what else is super chic is The Brood. Have you seen the fashion and the clothing and the sets of The Brood? Like,
absolutely.
Same chicness. Yeah.
Our heroine, our anti-heroine, our shrieking banshee of The Brood. She has to be a gay icon for the way she wears that like draping white frock.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Carter, you, again, The Passenger is your movie that you have coming out. It is an MGM plus Blumhouse production. That is what succeeded the Epix Blumhouse production deal. So that's that pipeline that is coming through. And that is a movie about two men working in a fast food restaurant together. One of them, in the form of Kyle Gallner, goes ballistic. In the old parlance of, I guess, being a millennial, goes postal and starts killing people. And then it ends up as this like strange kind of road trip, dark horror drama at points comedy. Like, the laughter that Kyle Gallner can conjure out of a gallows humor moment is very impressive. So I guess my two questions that I would have about The Passenger specifically are, one, what is it like to work with one of our greatest living actors, Kyle Gallner? And two, tell me about what draws you to movies that delve deep into the relationships of men.
Well, I mean, first of all, Kyle is like a dream. Like, he's, you know, I mean, I was a fan before The Passenger. Absolutely. For sure, but like, I wasn't like the fan that like I had seen everything that he ever did on TV, and I didn't even know a lot of that stuff. I was just a fan of like what I had seen of him, and you know, he just has this ability to, in a millisecond, flash between, you know, charming leading man and like crazy psychopath, like, you know, killer.
He has, I really put my finger on it when I was thinking about it for me personally. He is an heir to like the James Spader effect, where how could someone be so sexy when they are even as much when they are repulsive, how can they be so alluring when they are horrifying as they are when they are charming and when they're meant to be your hero? And Kyle Gallner has that duality in him. He's unbelievable.
Well, and the character that he plays in this, Benson, is like, when I read the script for the first time, it was one of the things that really, like, about halfway through, it kind of landed for me, like, oh, I'm rooting for Benson. And like, that's really not the expected like, he's awful, he's done horrible things, and like, why am I like rooting so hard for him to like be okay and for him to like get what he needs? And like, I kind of, it was like this odd instinct that I had, and it was one of the things that was the most exciting about the script for me, was like, exploring that and exploring, like you said, this weird messed up relationship at the core. Like, the idea that he could bring so much to the table and help Randy so much in this weird way that like should not be happening, but it is happening. And like, you kind of have to just kind of surrender, like Randy, you kind of have to surrender to it and go along for the ride. But I think, like, in terms of like male relationships or like, friendships or, whatever is at the heart of that. I mean, I just am always drawn to complicated relationships. I feel like relationships are complicated, and the more
Swallowed is very much a complicated relationship between two men, and what each of them is willing to do, in the bonds of having of this heated kind of friendship between, like, love and lust and friendship and covetousness and like all the things that are really the unifying queer experience. Yeah,
I did Swallowed, and then I was in post on Swallowed. I was finishing up the edit when The Passenger came along, and like, I never probably would have sought out like a two-hander, two guys, together type, like something so similar in terms of how it's, the characters that it's focusing on. But like I said, I fell in love with Randy and Benson, and it's different enough. It's a completely different, type of film. But it is, sort of equally claustrophobic, and, the idea that they're trapped together in this car, and it checked all the boxes of like what I want to spend like a year or more of my life working on.
That is such a specific consideration of this industry. It's like, oh, I'm going to embark upon this project. This is how I want to spend the next 1 to 3 years of my life, if it goes in a timely fashion.
Yeah, because it could be 6 years, it could be 7 years, it could be, I probably spent 7 years on Jamie Marks is Dead, like, which is, like, it's just too long to struggle with telling one story.
Yeah, I had Brandon Cronenberg on for an episode, and he talked about, like, it was 7 years to get Possessor made.
Yeah.
And that's like, that's a long-term relationship when you're just like, so we're making a movie, guys, like, that's going to define a decade of my life.
Yeah. Sad but true.
And so, speaking of like the relationships between men, the character that you have brought for us to discuss today, one of the most famous men in all of horror, Jesse Walsh, from Nightmare on Elm Street to Freddy's Revenge.
Yeah.
Someone is coming back to Elm Street. He is not friendly. He is not patient.
Kill for me.
But he has something terribly special for the new kid on the block.
It started to happen again.
Dad! I'm in trouble. You've had some scary dreams, okay? Help! Daddy can't help you now.
There's something inside him.
He is, like, he was so many things to me in so many ways when I saw that film for the first time. Like, I was a horror kid. I loved all of the, like, anything that I could get my hands on, every like trashy video ever, and I grew up in a small town in Maine, and we had one video store, so I was like super limited into what I was exposed to. And there was something about, and I was too young to understand what it was when I was watching it, but there was just something in Jesse Walsh that I was like, oh, like, I wanted to be him. I wanted to be his friend. Yeah. I wanted to dare to wear that shirt that he was wearing to my high school. Like, I wanted that best friend that, like, everything about him, like I felt like, for the first time I was seeing someone that had something in common with me in the horror movies that I loved. And just which just had never happened before. And it wasn't that he was, there was nothing, overtly. I mean, of course, now with hindsight, it seems, of course, obviously overtly
with hindsight
queer,
and a whole documentary about it and everything.
Yeah. But like at the time, it was more just like this unspecified feeling of like, I have something in common with him and I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if it has to do with sex or sexuality.
Yeah.
But like, it was just a moment when I was like, okay, maybe I can find people that in movies that I like, that I can somehow relate to and see myself in.
And how old were you when you watched it for the first time?
I mean, I was probably like 14.
Oh, perfect age.
Yeah,
perfect age.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe a little young, but like, yes, it was perfect. Yeah.
As someone who had very few bumpers on when they could watch very harrowing movies in their life, 14, I'm like, oh, we're veterans at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, I was old enough to know that we had something in common, but not quite old enough maybe to understand what it was fully.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to work out on my own.
Yes, I know, but something's bothering you.
Mom.
We're just very concerned about you. Jesse!
I'm fine.
Can't...
Just leave me alone.
Can't we at least talk about it?
No.
He needs professional help. I think we have to take him to see a psychiatrist.
Oh, come on, Cheryl. You out of your gourd. What the hell will that do?
I don't know. I just feel he needs help, and we don't know how to give it to him.
Oh, come on, Cheryl.
Are you hearing me? That boy's in trouble.
No, he's not in trouble. What that boy needs is a good goddamn kick in the butt. That's what he needs.
A thing I wanted to bring up with this was, like, I didn't expect to come upon this line of questioning, but then I remembered I once heard the Columbia professor, Jack Halberstam, who is a person of queer experience, who's a trans man, Jack Halberstam, talk about the Hays Code, obviously the production code coming down in the 1967. And his point of view was that was damaging for queer cinema, that wasn't that was not exactly a positive development for queer presence in cinema, because he's like, it all became so obvious after that. He's like, you had to be so much more creative and interesting in the production code and so much more challenging and like dare people to search for the truth. And then when it was all in front of the screen, he found himself like he found himself more bored with the offerings because it was just presented to you on a plate. So I wanted to talk to you about balancing subtext and text in your work, in work that does, it has multiple times now with Swallowed Midnight's Kiss and The Passenger, it centers on these sort of male bonding, like rituals or processes and relating to one another, connections between men, gay or straight. And then I remembered, I read an article, an interview that you gave fairly recently, you talked about in making The Passenger, I think the screenwriter was like, there's no gay anything here. But then you went and talked to your actors.
And we were like, it's like, there's like a lot of gays. Yeah, it was one of the things like when we were prepping the script to go into production, Blumhouse, actually, there was a couple people there that were like, what do you want to maybe dig into this and like, should we talk to Jack and see what he says? And so we did. And he was like, no, there's no gay subtext there.
Right. Sure.
And
okay.
I was like, okay, well, okay, but I can take that and I'm going to run with it. And, and then talking to Kyle, and it was kind of like, no, of course there's something to explore here. And it's, it's definitely not, I mean, it's on the surface, I guess, for some people will pick up on it, but it is, it's not necessarily central to the story, but it is, I think, part of what has made him who he is, whatever his past is. And we didn't feel like it was necessary to explain it, but like it was fun to kind of look for places where Benson could sort of express his maybe need for intimate moments, like friendship. And and then, like there's these wonderful moments when he like touches Randy's neck or like it kind of breaks the wall around what their situation should be, and it becomes kind of intimate and uncomfortable and strange in really interesting ways.
And as somebody who watching Freddy's Revenge when you're 14 and you're feeling connected to Jesse in a lot of ways, and including some ways imperceptible to you at the time, but that are just kind of pulling you, they're like, I'm not sure of why all the feelings that I have are present right now, but I know there's a lot here, and I'm just gonna ruminate with that. I'm gonna marinate in that. But then as somebody who would, as a film enjoyer, and then somebody who would go on to be making films of their own, what is your sort of point of view or your relationship with embedding things into a film, knowing that once it leaves your hands, it's going to belong entirely to the audience, and they're going to do with it what they will? What is a kind of how do you play with subtext, and what is sort of a way that you can sew things into the fabric for your own personal delight, or to enrich the story for people who might go looking for those sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of it probably happens without even, without realizing and without thinking about it. I always become pretty obsessed with the wardrobe, the books that are on the bookshelf, the sort of the staging of, the sort of blocking, and whether characters are separated by a doorway or they're together on the, stuff like that. But I think that a lot of it is just coming from a place of it happening naturally, and then sort of in the moment on set, recognizing that I'm responding to something, or something is working really well. And then sort of after the fact realizing, now I understand why I wanted to stage this whole scene with someone standing in the closet doorway, or whatever it is. But a lot of times it's not as obvious as I might like to think.
I feel it's really just is one of the most fascinating things about Freddy's Revenge to me, the evolution of its creators' willingness to speak about the breadth of interpretation of Jesse and this movie, because it's really there was a years and years there where there was a sort of refusal to acknowledge that this is a very gay, very homoerotic movie, and Mark Patton essentially leaving the industry after it came out, and in the process of making it, feeling an increasing sense of anxiety as he's seeing the dailies, and he's this is unmistakably homosexual, and I'm going to be outed, I'm going to be very exposed making this movie. And then at the beginning you have the director and screenwriter being nope, I don't know her, and then over time finally coming to a place of, I think, the director acknowledging there absolutely was subtext there, but I did not see it at the time, and the writer even saying overtly, I wrote this movie as a response to gay panic and a commentary on the AIDS crisis. And it's wow, that is a wild move. And
that's a big difference from I didn't know what I was doing, or I wasn't aware of it at the time. And there's something actors are also they're so putting yourselves in the hands of a director, and and sort of allowing yourself to be the clay that we work with to tell stories. You have to have so much trust, and you have to really believe that the people telling this story are, wanting to tell the same story that you're wanting to tell. And I think that's one of the things that I found so heartbreaking about, the Freddy's Revenge is I think that, Mark probably didn't, think that he was taking part in this story that was an AIDS allegory, or, gay pan. None of that was super clear, I think, to him, but he kind of gave himself over to them to do with what they wanted, and kind of ended up getting, the short end of the stick.
Well, and I think a thing that I don't feel comes up as much when I, because it's a movie that it's got to be one of the most relitigated, at the very least, of the slasher movies that has ever come out. Freddy's Revenge. Watching, anytime I go back to it, I always remember, what we don't really bring up is that Mark Patton did a great job in this movie. Mark Patton actually gives a great performance in this, and it really stuck with me. It really hit me again this time watching it, seeing in the scene where he goes to Grady's bedroom and jumps on him and covers his mouth to keep him from screaming, and he's explaining, he's there's someone who wants to hurt me, and he's I don't know.
Jesus Christ, you scared the shit out of me, man. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, what the fuck you doing in my room?
Listen, I'm in trouble. I need you to let me stay here tonight.
Are you out of your mind?
I don't know.
Oh, man. Why don't you just go home and take a bottle of sleeping pills?
I killed Snyder.
You what?
Only it wasn't me, see? There's something inside of me. And last night it made me go to my sister's room. And tonight with Lisa on the cabana, it started to happen again.
I think you are seriously losing it, bro.
I'm scared, Grady. Something is trying to get inside my body.
Yeah, and she's female and she's waiting for you in the cabana. And you want to sleep with me.
Look, I don't care if you believe me or not.
Hey, I believe you. You've had some scary dreams, okay?
No. I don't. No.
I was like, damn, this is a good dramatic scene from Mark Patton right now.
I know. Like he was in it 100,000% and gave, and that is, I love it when actors are willing to like jump off the cliff like that.
With your two careers as a fashion photographer and a director, do you find, does one medium elicit different things from your gaze than the other? Like obviously there's a whole, like the mise en scène in a film, like you're telling a story with everyone, but you're doing the same thing in fashion too, but you're not, you need to do it still life. And it's, characters aren't going to be interacting, like pulling out books and reading them aloud to you to let you know what they're thinking kind of thing. Like, how do you find each of those mediums teases out your creativity differently as somebody trying to tell a story through an image, moving or still?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's in a lot of ways, it was, incredibly helpful to spend so long taking still photos before I ever made a film, because like my still work, like I'd love to try to tell a story with it. And
well, and fashion is so much narrative. Yeah,
exactly. And I was like coming up with complex, long form stories. Like I did a shoot, that was about a young American GI that was stationed in Shanghai who met a singer at the Beijing Opera, and they fell in love, and she took him back to her village where she grew, like, and it was like a 35-page story in, W Magazine. And so like, really, very, very cinematic stuff. And, but with each image, you have one frame to tell whatever that moment is. And so I got really well versed in sort of considering every single thing that's in that frame. That
feels like being a writer and then taking the job of an editor and then having a bigger, like a more 360 understanding of like the copy that you're gonna turn in. Like, what is my editor gonna need from this story to make it as best as it can be for print?
Yeah, because it's a different skill set, and I got really used to understanding or thinking that I understood like how a hairstyle, what that says and what the color of a shirt says and if there's sweat stains or where the light is or is the door open or closed in the back of the frame. Like all that stuff became stuff that I would obsess about. And, of course, when you're making a film and you have, you can do it in more than one frame. I'm still focusing on all that stuff. So hopefully I'm starting from a place where I've already taken baby steps towards telling that story, if that makes sense. I'm already, trying to do as much as I can visually before there's any spoken dialogue or before there's any action or before there's, any of that stuff happens. But I mean, at the end of the day, photography, fashion photography especially, like you're in advertising.
Completely.
You're selling clothes or you're selling makeup or you're selling perfume or so you're very much, you can do all you want and pretend that it's as artistic and creative as you want, but at the end of the day, like you're selling a product, which I mean, I guess you are in film as well, but it's a little less on the nose maybe.
Has that feeling fluctuated, become greater or less than over time? Like, The Ruins is happening back in the 2000s. Now we're in 2023. Has that relationship between film and product, has that changed at all over the years in how you've experienced it as a filmmaker? Like, do you feel like you've been pushed more toward a product thing as like, IP and like, social media and such like that? Like, I don't know. Is that like a pressure that you feel more so or less than or neutral over the years?
I think that I maybe felt it more up until I made Swallowed.
Oh, okay.
Swallowed was kind of this like I had never, The Ruins was my first film. And so like I came
coming out throwing haymakers, damn it.
And it was like it was DreamWorks. It was like it was released on thousands of screens, and it was like a full on movie, which is not ever what I thought would sort of be my first feature. Like I always kind of imagined it would be some weird, dark little indie.
Yeah.
And, like Swallowed. And so I kind of, after years of developing stuff and for one reason or another, stuff falling apart or not getting made, or I kind of was like, okay, I have to take back control in a way that I felt like I'd sort of lost in allowing other people saying yes, or whether it's financiers or studio, like whoever, to sort of give me permission to tell whatever story it is I was trying to tell. And so I wrote it very much with the intent, like, okay, like it's going to be great if we can find someone to finance this, but like this is also a film that we can go out and make in the woods for no money with eight people and kind of do it all ourselves. And that's what we ended up doing. And I think that like knowing how to do that, which I'd never done that before. I wasn't a kid that was making like home movies and stuff when I was little. Like knowing that it's possible was really empowering.
That's
and really
amazing.
Like it sort of freed me from thinking like, okay, well, I have to work on a project that is going to be able to open in this many theaters, or I have to deal with something that has IP attached to it.
Yeah.
Like, no, I can, that's all that stuff is great. And sure, I will, entertain any of it, especially if it's super interesting. But like, if not, then I can go and make another movie in the woods with a couple friends. And in this day and age, like I can actually have it find its audience, hopefully.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly with more from Carter Smith, including how he brought things full circle when he cast Mark Patton in his 2022 film Swallowed. Then at the end, you'll have one quick thing before I go about Taylor Swift. It's not movie news, but it is news about me and my love and passion as a Swiftie who's going to the Eras tour. So stick around.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura House.
And I'm Annabelle Gurwitch, and sometimes it feels like the whole world is a dumpster fire.
Right? There's too much to worry about.
That's why we make Tiny Victories. It's a 15-minute podcast where we celebrate our minor accomplishments and fleeting joys.
And listeners call in, like Valerie, who found the perfect gift for her daughter's boyfriend, and Adam, who finally turned his couch cushion the right way.
And little happinesses, like how birdsong helps your brain.
That's science. So join us in Not Freaking Out for 15 minutes a week.
That's Tiny Victories with Annabelle and Laura, Mondays on Maximum Fun.
Whew, it's a tiny victory just to make a network promo.
Honestly.
Are you tired of being picked on for only wanting to talk about your cat at parties?
Do you feel as though your friends don't understand the depth of love you have for your guinea pig?
When you look around a room of people, do you wonder if they know sloths only have to eat one leaf a month?
Have you ever dumped someone for saying they're just not an animal person?
Us too.
She's Alexis B. Preston.
She's Ella McLeod.
And we host Comfort Creatures, the show where you can't talk about your pets too much, animal trivia is our love language, and dragons are just as real as dinosaurs.
Tune into Comfort Creatures every Thursday on Maximum Fun.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. Today I'm talking with director Carter Smith about Jesse Walsh, the character played by Mark Patton in Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, which you might have heard referred to as the gay one in the Freddy franchise. We're talking with Carter because his latest film is coming out. It is called The Passenger, and it stars Kyle Gallner. Now, let's jump back into our conversation. When did you start realizing that you wanted to create characters of your own or imbue life into characters that would go out and perhaps reach people the way that a Jesse Walsh reached you?
Yeah. I mean, I was always creating characters. I was always like, even in high school, like that's how I started in photography. Like I would come up with these elaborate scenarios and like I would make an outfit, and I would do the hair and makeup and I would make sets, and we would go to the railroad tracks, and like it was very much like a weird little like making stories on my own.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, like the one of the first scripts that I'd ever developed was a script that I wrote with Dennis Cooper, who is like a kind of notorious, infamous, like queer author who I'd been a huge fan of. And we worked on a project together. And when it came time to make my first film, like I was a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I want to be a gay filmmaker.
Yeah.
And I had this weird hesitation to it, because like the project that we worked on was super gay.
Yeah.
And I had this weird hesitation, and I don't know what it came from necessarily, but I felt like being put in a box was something that I was so used to growing up in a small town, and I just kind of wanted to not live there.
Yeah.
For all of eternity.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem like there was as much opportunity to like switch boxes.
Yeah.
And
people love to bring work to writers and directors because it's the same thing they've done over and over again. Hey, you're good at this thing. You want to do this thing again and again? Yeah.
Great. We'll hire you for it.
Yeah. You're like, okay, well, I need to eat, so I guess I'm doing that again.
Yeah. Yeah. And with Swallowed also, like, because I wrote it and it was something that like I never intended to really run through like a more conventional sort of system.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't going to look for finance. So I was just kind of like, I'm going to write exactly the movie that I want to see.
Yeah.
And then exactly the movie that I wanted to see when I was flipping through tapes at the video store and I never found. And like Swallowed was not the first script that I wrote like that. I wrote probably 3 or 4 before that, but they were all like either a little too big or a little too expensive or a little too complicated, and that sort of kept them from getting made.
Going from like first film being in I think is The Ruins 2007 or 2008?
I think it's 8.
I think it's 8. I think 2008, and then going to obviously like the available and broader penetrating language that we have around identity now, much different than it was in the 2000s, a very binary era, a very sort of homo-nationalist era. But what we have now is this like growing and growing and growing panoply of options and vernacular choices to like really specifically identify ourselves in the world, and like not wanting to start with like a gay filmmaker and exist in that box of a gay filmmaker. Do you find that your desire for, or lack of desire for, an identification as a filmmaker, is that still the case? Or with language becoming more broad and more flexible, does that allow for more room for you to be like, no, like being a gay filmmaker now can mean more, so I don't mind being a gay filmmaker? I
feel like I've landed on this idea of like being a queer horror filmmaker or making gay horror movies. Like
that sounds great.
That sounds great to me, and I spent a lot of time avoiding it and sort of like thinking about it in a lot of different ways, but like at this point I'm kind of like, I want to make the movies that I want to see, and I'm a huge horror fan. I have seen too many horror movies with no one that I could relate to in them, and stories that their stories that meant nothing to me. And I think that there's something so powerful about seeing yourself in these movies. And it's not, there's of course the sort of tender coming out stories, there are the angsty like estrangement stories, and I think that like there's so much more to the gay experience than that. And I think that I'm all for like longing glances across like an Austrian locker room during swim practice. Like I've seen that movie and I'm there for it. But like I also want dark, dirty, like violent, scary movies that are just so happening to be unfolding around queer characters.
I think a standout element of The Ruins is it's truly one of the most savage films of that era. And you watch like people cutting into themselves to pull out like invasive like carnivorous plants kind of situation. I watched that now, I'm like, Saw didn't have the fucking guts that this movie did. And then like I'm watching The Passenger, there's a scene where someone is killed and the body is moved after that person is killed, and the way organs and blood slosh off of where that character had been laying and just plop on the floor, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
We are in the first 10 minutes of this movie right now.
Yes. And
it was
that gave
amazing.
me such a perverse sense of glee with it, like that we captured that. And that, like, because I don't think we expected it to happen like that, but it did. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real like, and just with it's a phenomenal. It plays phenomenally well.
Good.
To take it back to, because we'll always be taking it back to the film. I'm wondering if, watching Jesse Walsh in Freddy's Revenge, when you like realize that you were relating to this character, with that, had you previously experienced a sense of any kind of like alienation or absence from the fact that you hadn't really found a person who fit you the way that Jesse did? Or was that not something you really dwelled upon until you saw this character and you were just like, that's my guy?
Well, it wasn't anything that I thought about probably before that. It was like, I was happy to like, to watch the, whatever creative kill that was happening. Yeah. So like, although I was always sort of content with all of these other, with, the cool monster or the cool death scene, like all of that seemed to be enough for me. And it wasn't until I saw Nightmare 2 that I was like, oh, like that was, the first time when I felt like, oh, maybe that I should be like hoping for more. Like maybe I should set my expectations a little higher than, just a cool kill or like seeing a glimpse of like a girl's titties in the shower.
Yeah.
Like, that, felt like what I should be excited about, but like it wasn't, it was enough up until that point, and then after that, it was sort of before Nightmare 2 and after Nightmare 2. Yeah,
that's I think that gets so acutely at something that just interests me so much about like why the conceit of the show is what it is, because like it raises like the possibility models that we can see have the impact of not just making us feel like somebody out there is us, but that it gives us permission to demand that we exist in other places. And that is one of the biggest things we can realize about ourselves, is that the points in our lives that we realize we can demand our worth or our value.
Yeah. And to see ourselves in a way that we want to see ourselves, and not in a way that someone else thinks that we should be seen.
That is, it's like a bittersweet kind of thing, because it's like, oh my gosh, like I've raised the bar on what I want for myself, and that's really great. And now I'm aware of what I don't have and how many places,
the gaping hole of nothingness.
And all the places that I don't have it. Yeah. And I like, as a creator yourself, how do you find I don't know, kind of remedy that in your own life or insist upon that in your own life? Just this idea of like, no, I know that what my bar is for what I need for me, but this industry is so difficult in what, like you said, in development on a lot of things, and then they fall away for whatever reason that has nothing to do with anything personal. But it's just like, there's a reason why people get good news and they're like, well, I have some news, but I can't talk about it for 2 years. How do you care for that knowledge in yourself that you want to demand more, while knowing you also want to get your stuff made?
Yeah, and I think that like I started writing early on, and I always wrote as a sort of antidote to the traditional development process. So I, for years and years, I've always been sort of writing something that sits squarely within my little queer horror sweet spot.
Yeah.
That fulfilled the need for me to like tell those stories, even if they didn't end up actually getting made and going to the screen. Like I was creating them, and I have a stockpile of them now for, when people are ready for them. But like, I never sort of felt like it would be maybe productive or successful to try to strong arm that stuff into the sort of traditional development process. Like I read the Ruins script and fell in love with it, and like there was nothing queer about it, but like I loved the story and I loved the characters, and same thing with The Passenger. Like I read the script and fell in love with it, and it didn't matter that it wasn't like a queer story to me, and because I kind of have this other little parallel path of my other dark little stories that are unfolding at all times. So like it was very much like, okay, I'm gonna just be here alone doing this on my own, and I'll dip in and out of it, and I'll kind of, much like fashion to film, like I'm sort of going from little micro indie queer horror to sort of stories that might have a bit of a wider, broader, I don't want to say appeal, because I don't think that there's anything less broadly appealing about the smaller stories, but just, less specific maybe in terms of who they're talking about.
With your stockpile of, characters sort of waiting in the wings for when the world can know them, or when there's a landscape for when they, what is something weird you are hoping to be able to usher into the light? Like, not giving away your stories, of course, but like your own little weirdnesses and your little darknesses. What are we missing, Carter, that you're like, one day I want this kind of freak show to
there was a script that I wrote that I adapted from a book. It was way back, right? It was before The Ruins, the movie that I couldn't get made before I tried to do The Ruins. And it was about a expat photographer living in Iceland who finds an injured, abandoned baby troll behind the trash cans in his apartment complex. And a troll is like sort of a feline primate, like animal, not a little man, but it's like an animal. And it's injured, and it's a baby, and he takes it in and nurses it back to health and develops an increasingly twisted relationship with it.
Wow.
Yeah. And like, this was back in the day when like, there was like 475 VFX shots in it, and it was definitely like a bigger scope that would be necessary to make that film than what anyone would be willing to spend on it. So there's a book, the book is called Troll, and it's by a Finnish author called Johanna Sinisalo, and it's an incredible book.
I really enjoy folklore horror of Scandinavia. And
you will love this then.
Listen, if we've got more that we can have in the vein of Troll Hunter, like, then I'm absolutely like, but that is gayer and like more horror.
With like a touch of bestiality. I mean,
well, okay. Did you? Oh, I'm losing the title of it right now. It's a Brazilian movie from a couple of years ago about like
good manners.
Good manners. This yes, this was calling Good Manners to mind as soon as you were like, and he takes it in, and then like a strange relationship. So let's get this get this so we can double bill it with Good Manners. When you saw that movie, were you like, this person and me, we are aligned?
Yeah, it was a little bit. It was definitely like, oh, I like what they're up to for sure.
My movie, my troll baby is a little closer to existing, knowing that Good Manners is out in the world.
Yeah.
Well, what was it like bringing Mark Patton into a film of your own?
Yeah.
This formative moment, 14 years old, then you reach out to Mark about a character in Swallowed. And I remember I was working on the docuseries Queer for Fear at the time, and I think Mark might have been back and forth from shooting Swallowed at the time, because I remember he was talking about like he was shooting this thing he was really excited about, and it sounded like it was in the middle of nowhere, really small production. Yes,
that was us.
All right.
Yeah. I wrote it with him in mind. I'd seen Scream Queen, and he sort of hadn't left my mind after seeing that. And so I wrote that character 100%, with him at the heart of it. I didn't have any relationship with him. I'd never met him. And, but I sent him a message on Instagram. Like I sent him a DM and was like, I wrote a script and there's a part for you. And he was kind of like, oh yeah, thank you. Great. And I was like, no, like it's real. I'm going to make this movie and I want you to be in it. And
yeah, you're not playing a version of Jesse Walsh either. This is like a cameo thing. Like, this is a part for you.
And he tells a funny story because he's like, when I got the script, like I got 30 pages in and I was like, but I'm too old to play, this lead boy. And then, of course he gets to the point when his character arrives and he's like, oh, I get it. I'm going to be this guy. And I think that it was really frightening for him in a lot of ways.
Where are you, you stupid cocksucker? You can't go anywhere. I got seeds.
In spending a lot of time with him talking about it afterwards, he said that it was the first time that he had ever stepped on a set and not felt like he had to hide an aspect of who he was. Wow. And he wasn't worried about the light, and he wasn't worried about what other people were saying about him behind his back, and he wasn't worried about all of that stuff that had been such heavy baggage for so long.
Yeah.
And like to be able to be the storyteller and filmmaker that like made that possible for him just like fills me with joy.
Well, and it's so chronicled what that experience of Freddy's Revenge did to him, and the handling, the filmmaker's handling of it afterwards, and how he felt so abandoned by them. Like, that is, I feel like that's, you know, that like an aspect of these conversations too that I love so much is like, it's that cyclical, the relationship between consuming art as people who will go on to create it, and then the things that you've watched informing the way that you make your own art in the future. And like, you were able to bring Mark Patton into your future work, making something that felt very true to you. Like you said, just making a movie in the woods with your friends and giving him something that could feel true to him.
And Mark Patton was there. He was one of the friends.
What an amazing arc. To your own experience of being able to give the recognition to Mark Patton, like a piece of that, it seems like, that you felt in watching him from a movie from 1984.
Yeah. And it was I think it was fun for him too to like play a character, you know, to play a character that was a different type of character, like to play someone that was seedy and twisted, and like, you know, he's not without his like, you know, he obviously has been through stuff, and he's you know, he's not like hopefully like a one note bad guy, but like, you know, it was definitely a character that, especially a queer character, that you don't often see, you know, and I think that was interesting for me writing it, but I think it was also kind of exciting for him playing it.
Why are you doing this? Because, Randy, I have been watching you. You are 20 years old, and you are already more pathetic than every person in this godforsaken town, and that bugs me. But there's something about you. There's something fixable. I'm in hell when you were standing there, watching me, waiting for me to kill you. That was the only thing I believed.
I appreciate like the localization of your work onto like the relationships of men, like and through Midnight's Kiss we have a group of gay men going off to a Palm Springs weekend, and then in Swallowed we have like one man who's like about to go off and pursue a career in porn in LA, and like the guy, the friend who's like been lusting after him for so long, and this tale of unrequited love. And then in this we have these two ostensibly, you know, as far as we know, straight men, but you know, the definitions of desire and intimacy being like flexible, and seeing these two connect to each other. And as a girl's girl whose favorite movies are all about like women getting theirs, it is a treat, it is a pleasure to watch these movies that challenge the like conventional relationships of male intimacy that we see on screen, and I feel like show us a broader variety than is typical in what we're used to in your films.
Well, and that's what I loved so much about The Passenger, was that like this opportunity to, you know, paint this picture of this like new relationship. I mean, they barely know each other, and they're spending the day together, and like, sure, one of them is basically a hostage, but like, you know, they develop this like tenderness and this intimacy and this like sort of, you know, this fondness for each other that you know, really should not be flowering in the way that it does. You know, especially since they're both, you know, basically probably straight guys. And like, so to me, like that was a really fun thing to dig into, and, you know, to find ways to try to explore it and push it further.
How much longer do you think he's going to keep us out here?
It could be all night. The guy gets his rocks off like this. Hangs around queer S&M joints downtown. He likes pretty boys like you.
Get out of here.
So what about you and that rich baby you've been cruising to school with every day?
What about her?
Are you mounting her nightly or what?
Look, Grady, you got some problem with me?
No, bro. Just killing time.
Okay, dirtballs, hit the shower.
Well, listen, upon my rewatches again of Freddy's Revenge, Nightmare 2, I like Grady and Jesse more and more, and like the arc we get in that. Talk about like examining male relationships to like fighting, like pantsing a kid and fighting on a baseball field at school, to like Jesse storming into Grady's room and being like, I need to sleep with you because I'm scared. It's like, this is the friendship I want.
After the pantsing on the field, like, but when they're doing the push-ups, like, you know, the Grady is like, you know, kind of, he's like, I was just messing with you. Like, he's immediately like friendly and like, you know, and like, I think that's also part of probably what I loved about that film is like, I wanted Grady to be, you know, the bully that like, turned on a dime and said, "Oh, actually, come over to my house. We can hang out in my bedroom."
And the tenderness that he shows Jesse, like when like, you know, he's like, you know, Jesse's yelling, he's like, "You don't believe me," and Grady's like, "I do believe you," and then he kind of finally relents, and it's like, okay, like he's like, "Go make out with that girl who likes you," and he's like, "I don't wanna." And he just kind of looks at him tenderly. He's an underrated bully figure in cinema, Grady.
Yes, one of the hottest.
One of the hottest. I will leave it on Grady being one of the hottest. I will come to the end of our time. Carter, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing it with us. It's been such a treat to get to talk to you about one of my favorite horror movies of the 2000s and to talk about one of my favorite actors of the 21st century and just like the coalescing of your two lives into the work you make. And it's just been a delight to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you again to Carter Smith. The Passenger is out on digital and on demand tomorrow, so look for that on the service of your choice. It will be on MGM Plus later this year, and the Kyle Gallner Nation stays well fed as always. We are a very lucky bunch. And now, my one quick thing before I go. Listen, guys, I don't have any movie news today. I just have to tell you that I am going to see Taylor Swift starting Friday for back-to-back engagements here in Los Angeles. The Eras Tour is coming to town, and she's got her friends Haim with her, which means I'm going to hear No Body, No Crime live with the whole ensemble. Listen, when the Reputation Tour happened, that was also On the Run Part 2, and I had always wanted to see Taylor in Nashville, so I got tickets to her show there at Nissan Stadium where the Titans play. And it just so happened that that weekend, the On the Run 2 tour was coming through Nashville. So I scooped up last minute tickets with a friend for $50 each. And within a span of 2 days, I saw Beyonce and Taylor Swift. And a friend of mine was like, "Jordan, this is your Coachella." And I was like, "You're absolutely right, it is." This is a woman who has been at the top of her game and the game for more than a decade now. People think Reputation was like her dip, but it actually wasn't. It's like a very well-reviewed album, and people just remember the fervor around the lead single and her saying the old Taylor can't come to the phone right now because she's dead. But actually that album was really awesome. And then Lover is a goddamn delight. And then all of the sad girls out there and all the mopey people finally started taking her more seriously when she put out Folklore and Evermore. And then she brought in more fans. I'm a proud Swiftie. There are a lot of Swifties out there who make us look bad, who are making the fandom look like a bunch of dicks. But you know what? It's a big tent. I say you're all welcome. I say there's a Taylor era for everyone. And I cannot wait to go. Well, this will be my fourth Taylor, I think. I started in the Red Tour. I went and saw it. And upon exiting the show, I started texting a friend of mine. And simultaneously, his best friend was texting him as well as she was leaving Burning Man. And he told me that except for the places we were leaving, like you could swap out everything that we were saying as like the same thing. Like her process of like emotionally exiting Burning Man was the same as mine emotionally exiting a Taylor Swift show. So he said at the time that Taylor Swift is my Burning Man. And I think that is the core truth of it. I'm going to my Burning Man, guys. And that's 2 nights at the Eras Tour. I look forward to not being a changed person when I come out the other side because I've been right all along in my love for Taylor. And I have been in full bloom and full brightness as a Swiftie for many years now, so I look forward to being affirmed in my love and passion as a Swiftie. Yeah, that's it. I'm celebrating me and my tickets to the show. My multiple tickets to the multiple shows coming up this weekend. So I'll see you guys on the other side of Taylor. And that is our show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingScenePod or send us an email at feelingscene@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorcru on Twitter. That's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly by you.